So, hi everyone, it's Nina Collins, and I'm here today with Tamara Warren. Tamara is a car expert, and we're going to talk about women in cars. She's a lifelong journalist, grew up in Detroit, has written on lots of things, but has particularly focused her career on the automotive industry. And she's the founder of a new app called LeCar, Lecar, which the mission of LeCar is to make life with cars less of a hassle, and she facilitates buying cars and choosing cars. So I've got lots of questions for you, Tamara. Welcome.
I'm so glad to be here with you, Nina,
Yeah.
and talk about our favorite topic of the day.
Good. So I guess my first question is, on your website, it says that you co-founded this with your mother. Is that true?
It is true. So yeah, my mom, Henny, and I had been going round and round for years about what my experiences were as an automotive journalist and how I could never make anything for myself, for her, or at least that felt accessible. And, she's probably the reason that I have the chutzpah that I do. So it made a lot of sense that we just said one day, like, why don't we just do this together? Like, what do we have to lose? And that's how we got started.
That's so great. And she's a social worker, is that correct?
Yeah, so she had a long career in community mental health and really working, doing much better things in the world than I felt like I was doing. And after she retired, she had some, time on her hands. And being Detroiters, my father had worked in the auto industry when he was alive, so she'd been married to a car executive for decades. So she certainly had some background information prepping
Right.
speeches and stuff. So and also, like, cars are kind of maddening, so mental health skills come really in handy as we start to think about the brain and decision making and how people make choices about how they get around every day.
Yeah, the decision making question's a good one, because I actually consider myself like super capable, and like I've built houses, and like I'm very capable, but I actually really do have a hard time figuring out the car thing. And I've asked my son, actually I have 4 kids and my son's my youngest and he's 21 almost, and I've kind of said to him, can you become the car decision maker in the family? Because I never know. I like to buy cars, not lease cars, but I often think that's probably not the smart thing to do. I never really understand the difference between, like, why would you lease and why, or finance. I also never, like right now I have a 3.5-year-old Mercedes SUV, the cheap one, the kind of $55,000 one, cheap for Mercedes. And it's getting a little gross. Like I do find around 3 or 4 years, I'm always like, oh, this car is kind of gross, which is why I should probably always lease. But the one time I leased a car, then when you return it, they get you with all these fees and you kind of feel like you've just been renting something for, I don't know, there's something psychologically confusing to me. And right now, one of my daughters is 22 and she's moving to LA next week. So she has to buy a car. And so we're having all these conversations, like, should she buy a $6,000 used car? Should she lease a Kia? It all feels very abstract and like there's no real one answer. There's no right answer. So how do you help people figure this out?
Well, first I'd like to say that you are not alone, and that, okay, someone like me who has been driving cars and thinking about cars and talking to the top executives still finds car shopping confusing. And that's if you really think about the root of the problem. If you ever saw Mad Men and those shows about 1950s, super male dominated car culture, that's essentially still the framework of what we're living in. A system that was built that, car dealers working separately from car companies. And so it's chaotic to start with. And then when you get down to the consumer messaging and what's actually for you, there's really not a lot that's been built with you specifically, Nina, in mind, right, or in mind. And that's one of the problems that we're trying to solve, because most women find car shopping statistically the second most hated activity after going to the dentist, which, if you have braces, is probably on your mind these days, right? Yep. And so I'd like to just, point that out and just say, first, take a beat, take a breath, and wrap yourself like around that process. It's really somewhat like buying a home. The only difference is that a home is something that you'll stay with, 25 years, 30 years, if you're at least thinking in mortgage terms. With a car, you're right. You're leasing every 3 years, you're buying every 10. And so you're trying to make a decision anticipating what you'll need in the future without even really knowing what's available in the present. So
Mhm.
the first thing I like to do when I help people is to stop thinking about everything that's out there and actually start to think about what will work for you. How are you going to use your car? Where are you going to go? What are your top priorities? And and some of those are abstractions like safety or comfort, beauty, but really what does that mean? And what annoys you about the car you have today? What do you love about it? Kind of like searching for any kind of relationship in your life because you're going to be using this thing a lot. And
Yeah.
and if it's for and a lot of women tend to make the decisions about the vehicles for their entire family. The stats say 86%, and I really believe that's true. It's what they drive, it's what their partner drives, it's what their kids drive. And so you know your family best and your household best, so you start to think about those same decision making processes apply. So that's like the first thing that we
Yeah.
try to do is try to get you to kind of step back and think about what you need. And then once you have that identified, then you have to start sifting through the hundreds of vehicles that are out there. There's like 260 new models every year. And then when you add like pre-owned and features and different options and packages that have different names for every single automaker, each automaker has some kind of version of autonomous driving, level 2 autonomous driving that isn't even called that. So
Those
it's
are like the Teslas, the cars that are driving themselves. Is that what you mean?
no, Teslas actually have a higher level of autonomous driving skills. I'm talking about what we call ADAS, which is like a technical term for when you're basically in your car and it may stop or start or some kind of if you're
Oh
on
yeah, I had a Subaru that does that. Like it would stop if I got too close to something.
yes, or when you're driving for a long period of time and you set it to some kind of automatic version and then you're cruising along, then that's essentially the kind of tech we're talking about. Something that
Okay. Wait, I want to back up for 2 seconds. So the 10-year, if you're going to buy a car, the assumption is you'll have it for 10 years. Is that like an average or is that
yeah, well, the average American owns their car for 10 years, so
okay?
up or down, right? And it's really about when the car is fully out of warranty and when it no longer makes sense to put that money into repairs.
Hmm.
But when you look at luxury cars, like you mentioned, Mercedes Benz, to people tend to often lease in the luxury category just because they are interested in the newest features, the newest kinds of cruise control, or the newest kinds of safety features, or seat warmers, or connected car, like the way your Bluetooth works with Apple CarPlay or Android Auto.
Yeah, CarPlay is awesome.
Yeah. So, suddenly we used to be able to have a car for 5 or 10 years. Imagine using a phone that was 5 or 10 years old. And that's kind of how car ownership is probably going to continue to feel for the next decade, especially with
Interesting.
so many things happening. I don't know.
And
Yeah, go ahead.
is Lacar, is this business that you've started, are you aiming it at women particularly, or is it really for men and women?
Well, we like to say we're for women and men. And how I like to frame that is that it's not really about creating content that's exclusive, but more about being inclusive because we
Hmm.
think that, how women shop depends on what life stage they're at, depends on where they're, what they're really thinking about. And there's been so much stigma and stereotypes in the car industry about making cars for women. And I think the real point is we just want to be included and heard. So if we're women,
Yeah, because we're making the decisions, and it really is something that women do feel. It does feel like a sexist space. When you go into a car dealership, you do feel like you're at a disadvantage weirdly as a woman. And I mean, weirdly, I say because I don't feel that way any other place where I shop.
and I think it's through the whole industry when you from the suppliers and sources of material to the engineering departments to the senior management to it's like pervasive. It's like really a microcosm of what we need to change in the world. So that's why
Mhm.
I like working on this problem because we're about to enter a really exciting time for mobility. I don't know if you know this, but there's been like a ton of announcements in the last couple months about all of these electric vehicles coming to the market.
Oh yeah, I have heard that like every car maker I think I read will have an electric vehicle by, I don't know, in the next few years.
Yeah, and some won't even make gasoline vehicles by 2030. So, what that means is the people who buy the most cars, because women actually buy more new cars than men, are going to be the one leading the decisions. We are the most important customers. And so I think that there's a real opportunity for us to lead in this space and for us to learn about how to empower ourselves. The other thing about electric vehicles is they often don't require as much maintenance, so less back and forth with the dealer's maintenance department, more, obviously the environmental piece, less late night stops at a gas station, things that can sometimes make us feel vulnerable in some ways. And so what I like to think about is like the opportunity that exists to shift something that should have shifted decades ago.
That's super interesting. I didn't know that electric cars require generally less maintenance. That's a pretty big sales point.
Yeah, I mean, there's, pluses and minuses. It's for everything and lots of questions that people have. But again, if we don't even understand how to buy cars now, how are we going to figure this out in the future? So it's imperative that we get in there and don't see ourselves as like not the core customer and actually realize the power that we have. It's the second most expensive thing we buy next to our homes. So
yeah, no, it seems like a really good idea for a business from your part. I mean, is there anyone else, like who else is doing interesting things in the women car space? Anyone?
There's definitely, I mean, I'm not the first woman by any means. That if I look back generations before me, there was this really famous auto rater named Denise McCluggage who like raced in all the big races. And then there was Jean Jennings, who was the editor of Automobile magazine. But now there's actually a growing collective of us doing different things in different spaces, focusing on different parts of the problem. And I think that's really cool because we all know each other. We're such a small group in the space. And so I feel like we're all solving it in different ways.
Yeah, that's so funny. That's really analogous to the menopause space. I feel like there, like 5 or 6 years ago when we started our community, there weren't that many people talking about menopause in this kind of direct, funny way, contemporary way. And now there are a lot of people addressing it from different ways. So it's very similar. That's cool to see.
And it's such a massive problem that like no one person can figure it out. So some people are doing content sites. Some people are really like holding space in the influencer realm, and then you're starting to see like more women in racing, and so it's like popping up. And then also on the business side, leadership from people like Mary Barra, who was at GM, or Laura Schwab, who was the president of Rivian, or president of Aston Martin, and now is at Rivian. Like super inspirational women in the space leading. So it's sort of like we're out there, but we need to figure out how to like work together more collectively. And then also, really the fact that it makes sense because it is women that we're serving, and it is such like a huge expense. Just like, the menopausal space, when you look at health, there's a lot of analogs there.
Yeah, it's really interesting. And so your particular approach, I know you do a lot of test driving of cars, like you get invited, which sounds so fun. I'm a really good aggressive driver and I like to drive stick. And the idea of like doing really fast test drives always seems fun to me. So you write a lot about cars, you review cars a lot, you're out there, you have all these relationships with the car companies. And so the way you've decided to approach it is to help women buy cars. That's kind of your idea, right? Is to make that process easier and more thoughtful.
Yeah, what it really starts at first, I mean, it is a big commitment. So first it's about, visibility, allowing yourself to be seen in other cars. So we built a whole content site, lacar.co, which is really about challenging the way we look at cars and our own mobility and what interests us, and thinking about how we use our cars, because it's like a thing you probably start thinking about months, maybe even a year ahead of time.
Yeah.
Sort of how we like cruise Zillow and think, oh, gold, that's what I want. It's the same thing, I think, for cars, or at least should be, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And then as we start to educate you, then we can start to hone in on like, what is your sort of dream car, but then actually what makes sense. And so over time, then once you're in that car, now it's like, okay, you have this car. Maybe your car dealer didn't do a great job of helping you understand, or maybe you had a meeting, you didn't have time to like stick around and read the manual. So we also want to help people with their daily mobility, they're driving, biking, like really thinking about the ways they get around every day, because those are the things that we're going to see changing in the next decade as well too. But it starts with like the simple piece of like, well, what car suits you and what makes sense for your lifestyle. So we really want to think about all the ways that our personal mobility is changing. I mean, especially now, like we've all been sitting still and we're ready to go. And if we do get out right now, we're probably getting out like I do on the weekends and just like driving just to see and like feel alive and be stimulated. And we think that's a big part of what La Car is about and where we're going.
And why did you name it Le Car? My mother had a Renault Le Car when I was a kid, a green one.
Well, before I was an automotive journalist, well, I've always been a writer, right? And the other thing that Detroit makes is music. And so I had a friends that had a band called La Car, and I just always thought it, and they were techno musicians. And
It was a fun name.
for the hat, like a cover band app site, something like that. And
Yeah.
I the name, yeah.
So does your site offer a particular service that people pay for? How does it work? How do users interact with it? And what are your plans for it?
Yeah, so we're really in the early stages, but what you'll find there now, is that, we first, have entertaining content, we have reviews, we
I
have
just signed up for the newsletter.
great. So you'll be all looped in. And then, but what we are starting to roll out is that we have an app that's in beta, and it's a free service where you can be matched with your car based on a recommendation made by a journalist like me or somebody from my team. And then also what we do is we do provide some concierge services if you actually want to take that next step and really have someone there who is that like uncle who used to go to the car dealer with you, and maybe you would rather have somebody who's thinking about what you need now. Those are the levels of service we provide now. And then once things get going, we're excited to like open back up and really start to explore the idea of like, what does mobility mean for powerful women? And
Uh-huh.
so we'll be growing a lot in that area.
And kind of having events, and is that what you're thinking? Kind of lectures and experiences? I don't know. I'm just imagining.
Yeah, well, it's the lectures experience. And I will say that I never thought I would be a car journalist. It literally was something that I did after a really bad breakup when I didn't drive for a period of time. And I always like to challenge myself. And it was really through the space of the car, finding my own empowerment, but also over the years, having really bad experiences in cars, but then having really amazing experiences with cars and driving with people and really getting to know people deeply. I feel like it's a really unexplored space for conversation, for connection. And I think even before the pandemic, that was something that was super important to me. Like when you go on a trip, it's often like a space where a really important conversation happens. So I'd like to use the vehicle of the car to connect to other things that we care about in our lives. And
I love cars. To me, having a car means freedom. And like all my kids know how to drive, even though they grew up in the city, they learned right away, and they all have cars. Actually, it's a very important, it's very American in a way, I guess, but I do really
yeah.
feel like they're essential. Do you like Jerry Seinfeld's Comedians in Cars?
I do. I think that's a perfect example of that, right? Like it's such a format. You get in the car and, there's two comedians and you have a great conversation. It's funny because they're there, but you also know because we all have those like moments where we've been driving in a car and we have to like hold our bellies because we're laughing so hard about something. So I feel like he taps into that a bit. And then there is just like something so boss about like flossing all these different kind of cars.
I love it. I love all the different cars. He's great. No, it's really, really fun. What is your favorite car right now, or what are some cars that you're really interested in? And I'd also love if you have any kind of basic advice for women when they're negotiating for a car. Like, do you think women get screwed more often in the negotiation process, or are we just imagining that? So those are two different questions.
I'll take that one first. So yes, the short answer is I do, because I talk to so many women, and again, it's like the perfect storm for like a bad experience, bad information. Women tend to do like 75 hours like on all the blogs trying to figure out what to buy. So they're armed with all this information about something they don't necessarily fully have experience with, and then they just want to go to a dealership and if you went to buy a new dress, would you buy the dress without trying it on? And what if it was an important dress, right?
Right.
You really should try it on then and have it fitted. But so often women don't test drive; they're not encouraged to test drive cars. So
Really?
yeah, I think that's like a big first step. Is like you
I
should
always
feel
test drive.
comfortable. Yeah, you should
Yeah.
feel comfortable, and you shouldn't be forced into driving what the dealer has on the lot. And then there's this feeling of you feel like you're going to be taken advantage of, so you go in and it just already feels gross. And so it puts the car salesperson at a disadvantage too, because they're just trying to like live as well. So I think that there's a lot of information flow that's missing between the maker, the dealer, and the customer. And so for women, that is a huge disadvantage. And the women end up paying more oftentimes because they just don't want to deal with the hassle, or they don't know where they have leverage, or maybe
Yeah,
they,
I never know where I have leverage. That's the problem. Like I just, and often, you end up buying a car that has features you don't really need because,
that's more of the thing, because dealers have to sell what's on their lot before they can get the next batch of cars. And
Mhm.
so I think that's like a huge part of what the issue is, right? And then so if somebody comes in and they want something today, or they may not understand that they could order something else that could be there 6 weeks, or they could just go to another dealer.
Mhm.
So, it's a very like, it's not a very synchronous experience. So I
It's
think
not a great system in general.
and then the biggest part that we didn't speak to as well is the financing piece, where that is like a whole other area where how much car can you actually afford. So we try to, publish articles about these topics, but then also really get into the nitty gritty of being realistic and understanding, what does it mean to pay more for a lease versus buying maybe a pre-owned car that's a year old. Maybe that's a better choice. So it really
That
depends
seems
on
super smart, the pre-owned car, right? That's a year old, because it loses so much value the second it leaves the lot. I think that that's something I'm going to do with my next car.
Yeah, and a lot of people don't know that. But then, how do you assess what is, a lemon or a car that, something? And if you do buy a pre-owned car, like we suggest making sure you could have an independent mechanic, do a once over on it. Just really making sure that you protect yourself, and and that's literally like the theme. It's really like you have to have your own back when you're car shopping, and
Mhm.
it's kind of a funny thing when you think about like all the like flashy, snazzy car commercials we see, that the reality of like the experience is so much suckier, and there's just got to be a better way. So something to think about, and just have patience in the process. And it takes most women like 3 months to make the decision.
Mhm.
So try to anticipate this, so you're not in like a decision where your lease is up tomorrow and you have to decide, because so many of our users call or reach out in those like panicky moments, and that never feels good when you're shopping like that, right?
Right, right. You definitely want to take the time and really do the research and get help from a place like you, it seems, who,
And
benefit from your knowledge. So
yeah, yeah, most definitely. And then your second question about
what are
favorite
you
car.
loving, darling?
Yeah, I get asked this all the time. So I like classic cars personally, because being a Detroiter by nature, I think it's cool, like the sort of sculptural history. Yeah, so I grew up in a Mopar Chrysler family, so I have like a lot of love for like the old muscle cars in just an aesthetic sense, and then
Yep.
like weird Italian exotics like Bizzarinis. So that's where I can get super car nerdy. But right now, there's, if I have to like live in the real world, there's so many amazing vehicles out. Like it's really they're not really like bad cars made anymore. They're not cars that are just gonna like break
Right,
on you in a
right.
second, and they're warranted, so in that way I try to let people know it's really about like the nuance of finding out what works for you. And I like design, so I tend to like things that have great clean crisp design, kind of an easy UX experience inside the car, so everything feels like soothing and relaxing, but then also has a little performance and pep, because clearly I do like to drive fast. Yeah.
So what do you own right now, or do you lease, or do you own? What's your personal car situation right
Yeah. Well, it's kind of embarrassing, but we have three old Chryslers. My husband and I actually own these together. So they're like, one is an old police car, one is an old muscle car, and one is a race car. And then I tend to, I also still serve as, shout out to the World Car Awards. I serve as a juror. So I drive cars regularly for that. And then also for the cars that we review on thecar.co. So this week I'll be driving the Volkswagen ID4, which is an EV that Volkswagen is making, in their first EV to be in the United States, which is sort of
now?
a small crossover. I have an F-150 I'm testing out, which is kind of hilarious. Me, zipping around New York City in a big old pickup truck. And
I don't even know what an F-150 is. So that's a pickup truck? Okay.
then it's like probably like the most money making vehicle in America ever. Ford has sold them for decades. So it's still like where all the car companies make money are with these huge pickup trucks. especially.
Okay, good to know. My kids all want pickup trucks.
Yeah, I did. I drove a pickup truck when I was younger. It definitely had the.
They're pretty cool. I can see it. So you're always driving different cars. Like, how do you garage them? You live in New York. Do you pay for 3 garage spaces?
No, I have a friend who, not a friend who, no, we have a friend who manages a garage, and so that's a big help. And then, they're never here for too long, so they kind of come and go. And
so fun. I mean, it's your world. It's your business, obviously. So they just come and go. That's great. How fun. Does your husband also work in the car world?
Oh no, he's an artist, so I'm definitely like, his access point into seeing all the cool cars. But we do have a car club together called the Brooklyn Dodges. Wah, wah, wah. So
Wait, you have a car club together, you said?
Yeah.
And what happens there? What's that?
I mean, it's just like, it's mostly kind of funny because I find car clubs to be fascinating.
I don't even know what a car club is, Tamara. What is a car club?
Yeah, a car club is essentially where, it's like a coffee clutch where you get together and just like chat about cars and talk about cars. And then you end up talking about life. And maybe you drive your car someplace and you're just together with people and other people who it's like an endless stream of, social life around car. It's more common in LA. I have to say it's kind of ridiculous in New York, but in LA, they have these really cool things called cars and coffee. So on like Saturday mornings, you might get up and drive somewhere beautiful, and then you all drive your cars somewhere together and you catch up, and you do this every week, and everyone sort of tries to outdo the other person on what they're rolling up in. So
how hilarious. So it's basically, like a social club around cars though, but like I couldn't belong because I just have like a boring 3-year-old car that no one cares about. Like you have to be like into your car.
I don't know, you have opinions, right? Like,
yeah, I do. Okay. So I can still belong to a car club and just be interested in everyone else's car. Okay.
Yeah, probably actually bring something to it because they listen to the same old conversation, a little fresh perspective. And I think actually that one thing I've learned as like the fish out of water in the car industry, because I'm not sure average car enthusiast, is I think like asking weird, strange questions actually is entertaining for everyone. So I encourage more people to just go out and ask the questions, right? Like, otherwise, how are we going to figure it all out?
Nice. Okay, great. All right. Well, so Tamara Warren is definitely our car expert at the Wolfer. We're very excited to know that we have you in our corner. And I'm excited for your business. We'll definitely write and tell everyone about it. And, LeCar is the site, LECAR, and it's an app you can download and you create a profile and it's free. And Tamara does tons of content about cars and really is, if people have questions, let us know. We'll reach out to her and get answers. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Nina. It's such a big fan of what you're doing with the Wolfer, and I feel like you're here for me in the next decade when I really need help.
We're totally here for you, here to walk you through menopause. It's fun.
Smile.
All right, have a great weekend, and we'll talk soon. Take care.